In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a digital mock-up of your label on a clear plastic strawberry clamshell. And I provided several different photos that you can use to do this. I chose to do the demo on this one because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is show off your design work. And this one, because it's more shot from above and it's at an angle, I think it's going to give you the best representation of putting your label on there, although you're free to use any of the other images up there. So to do this, I'm going to start with this image, and I'm going to go and pull up a logo that was done for this class in a prior semester by one of my students. And this was the label that she designed. So to start, here's what we're going to do. What I want you to do is draw a rectangular box, and I'll explain why we're doing this here. If we go back to the photo here, the flat surface on this clamshell is approximately 6 inches by 3 inches. So that's what we're going to do with this box we're drawing. We're going to make this rectangle 6 inches by 3 inches. You can do that up here by adjusting the width, and I'll make that 6 inches, and then I'll make this 3. Make sure when you're doing this that your little link icon here is unlinked so that you can get the right dimensions on here. So this is a rough approximation of the flat surface on this clamshell. I'm going to give it a color outline that I'll be able to see easily, so I think I'll just choose my usual acid green. I don't know why that's always my go-to color on here. Now the key is we have to make this label fit. And what you want to do, picture this rectangle as being the flat surface. Do you want your label off to the side, one side or the other? I think in my case what I'm going to do is I'm just going to center these and use my alignment tools here. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So once you have it inside your rectangular box, then you're ready to place this into Photoshop. So the easiest way to do that, just select everything here, your label image and your rectangular box. Come up here under Edit, and you're going to copy it. So it's now floating out in the ether somewhere, and we're going to switch back over to my photo of my clamshell here. And now what I'm going to do is paste my label and my rectangular box in here. You'll get this dialog box. What you want to do is select pixels on this. We don't want to make this a smart object. We'll be talking more about smart objects later in the semester. So make sure you've selected pixels on here and go ahead and hit OK. And there you can see it's added a layer over here with my label, with my box on it. And now what we have to do is we have to put this onto the clamshell. And the way we're going to do this, there's a couple things to understand about Photoshop. Photoshop has a perspective function in it, and I have to tell you it has been uniformly bad as long as I've worked in Photoshop. In recent years, they also added a lot of 3D functionality into Photoshop, but it gets a little complicated, and it's more complicated than we need for what we're going to do right now. Instead, we're going to kind of fake it. And the way we do this, we're going to use the distort function. Sorry about the jump in the editing here. I had to edit out some barking dogs, so hopefully that won't happen again. Anyhow, what we're going to do with the label in my little rectangular box here, we're going to go ahead and place this in perspective on the top of the clamshell here. Now, Photoshop has a perspective function, and it has been uniformly awful as long as I've worked with Photoshop. In recent years, they added a bunch of 3D functionality into Photoshop, and we could use that if we wanted to on here, but it's actually a lot more complicated than we need right now. For this, what we're going to use is Photoshop's distort function, and to find that, come up here under the Edit drop-down menu, come to Transform, and then we're going to come over here to Distort. And what Distort allows you to do is we can kind of massage this image into place so that it looks realistic. So I'm going to grab the corners of my rectangular box, and this is why we put the rectangle in there. And I'm going to put this here. Now what I'm going to do is follow the lines that I can see here in the clamshell. So I'm going to follow this highlight down here. So if I grab this, so you can see I'm trying to line it up here along that. And then I'm going to eyeball this. Now I'm going to grab this corner. And again, I'm following the kind of reflection in here that you can see in the photo of the clamshell. And then let's go ahead and grab this one up here. Now, is it perfect perspective? No, it's not, but it's going to be close enough. Now I'm going to pick up this highlight on the edge of the clamshell. We'll go ahead and move this up here. And if I zoom out, that actually looks pretty good. So the whole purpose of the rectangular box here was to give me the corners so that I could line this up. And once you get this positioned so you're happy with it, might be a little bit off here. I actually jumped lines here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this down. So again, I'm just looking at the reflective edges on here, lining it up as best I can, and when I'm happy with it, go ahead and hit the return key on the keyboard, and that will lock that in. And once you've done that, the rectangular box was strictly for us to kind of get some corners that we'd be able to use that distort function. Now what you can do is you can just get rid of them. You can either grab the eraser tool if you want to, or I'm going to just use the lasso tool. And make sure if you do use the lasso tool up here that you have the feather set at 0. If there's a feather in here, it might actually delete part of my label. So once you do that, you can just come over here, let's see, grab this line. Now that I have a selection, I'm just going to hit delete on the keyboard. Go ahead and get this line over here, hit delete. Come over here, hit delete, and then get rid of the last one here. So once you do that, you're probably going to think you're done, but you're not. And the reason I say that is just because you have this in position, if you really want to make it look realistic. And here's the thing, the key to doing digital mockups, especially in packaging, is to make it look as believable as possible, to make it look as realistic. And currently the way this is right now, it looks a little just pasted in. And the reason it doesn't look completely realistic at this point is because of the lighting and shadows on here. I always tell all my students they really need to take a basic drawing class. And the reason for that is by taking a basic drawing class, you'll have a better understanding of how light and shadow work. And that's going to be the key to making this look believable. So the first thing we want to do is kind of look at our image here. I'm going to actually turn the label off on here and try and determine which way the light and the shadow is falling on here. You can see the highlights on some of these strawberries. You can see they get kind of stronger, which indicates to me the light source is up here a little bit. And then to confirm it, you can see there's a little bit of shadow on this bottom on the surface here. So your light source is up here somewhere. It's shining down. You can tell by the highlights on here as well. But the real telltale sign is look for the shadows, and you'll be able to tell which way your light source is going on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of light to your label to indicate that you have a light source up here and it's coming down here and hitting your label. And then we're going to add a little bit of shadow, because if this label was really on top of the clamshell, it would be casting a little bit of a shadow on the strawberries underneath here. And I'll show you how to do that. But let's start first with putting just a little bit, a hint of light on your label, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Now, the important thing is when you're working in Photoshop, you never want to do anything that's going to permanently mess up your underlying image here with your label. So we're going to add a little bit of a highlight on here, but we're going to do it as a separate layer. So come over here in your layers panel. You want to make sure you're on the label layer here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a locked layer to this that we're going to put a little bit of white or highlight on here. So the way you add a locked layer, I'm going to come down here and add a layer. It's the little icon next to the trash can. But as I mentioned, I want this to be locked, which means it will only affect this layer, the label layer. So before you click on this, hold the Option key down on your keyboard, and this dialog box will crop up. It's really important that you check this box. By checking this box, that means whatever I do on this layer, it is only going to affect the label. It won't affect the underlying image of the strawberries. So make sure this is checked. Use previous layer to create a clipping mask. Essentially what that means is the label will be a clipping mask, and anything I do on this label, on this layer, will only affect that. So go ahead and hit OK. Here you'll see it added a layer, but it's offset, it's indented a little bit, and you'll see it's got the downturn arrow telling me that this is locked to this layer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a slight gradation over here. So I'm going to come over here to my toolbar, and on the color picker over down here, I'm going to do black to white. I'm going to go ahead and grab my gradient tool here. You want to make sure that the gradient is going to be a linear gradation. You can look up here at the top. It's going to go black to white here. And with my gradient tool, I'm just going to do a sweep across my layer here. So there you can see the gradient, and you can also see it only affected the layer here. Now, obviously, that's not what we want. But I'm going to come back over here to my layer, and what I'm going to do is I don't want the black on there. I want a little bit of the white on there for kind of a sheen from the lighting on here. So come up here where it says normal. These are your blending modes. And there's various blending modes you can use in Photoshop. And if you go down here, this set here, whatever is darkest, like with multiply, will show, and the lighter white parts won't. So you can see if I were to select that, half my label would be black. That's not what I want. I want this second grouping down here, or actually technically third grouping. What these will do is the lighter part of this gradient will show, but the darks won't. And the one that I think will work best for this is screen. So there you can see I'm not seeing any of the black, but as the gradient goes across here and gets lighter, you can see the white comes through. Now the thing here is you only need a little hint of this light on here. So while you're on this layer, I'm going to come up here where it says opacity. And I'm going to drop it way down. I only need just a little hint that there's light on there. You can take it down probably to about 15%. It's just a hint of a little bit of lightness on there. So you're indicating that there's a light source and it's hitting your label. It's not going to hit it uniformly, and so you've got a little bit of a highlight on there. If you want, you could take it down even a little bit more. Anything below probably 10% may not give you the effect you're looking for. Let's take a look at it. Actually, 10's good. You only need a little hint of light there. We just need to have a sense that the light is hitting the label. Now let's talk about the strawberries here. How are we going to put shadow on the strawberries here? Now I could kind of do the same thing with create a layer on here and then just paint black in here and play with opacity. I think what'll probably work better is if we do an adjustment layer on here, and I'll show you how this works. Select the strawberries back here, and we're going to come down here and choose a adjustment layer. Good habit to get into when you're doing adjustment layers on separate layers, even though this is the background shot on here. Hold the Option key down again, and what we're going to do is come up here under levels or curves. You can do either one. I'm going to do curves. You'll get that same dialog box. And what you're going to do is get this dialog box in properties here. So this is curves. And what curves allows you to do, what you see here is what we refer to as a histogram. It's showing the amount of lights and darks in this photo of the strawberries under here. Down in this corner is absolute black. Up in this corner is absolute white. And if you look at the distribution here, you can see when you get into the lighter colors, there's quite a bit. That's the white background and everything that you see, the highlights. You'll notice there's actually nothing really here, or not very much, that's actually pure white up here. So what we're going to do is create a shadow overall on this. Now you can do it a couple ways. I can just grab this white point and darken that down, but that's going to also darken the background and everything. So I think what I'll do is just grab the center here. You just want to darken this a little bit. Maybe drop this down a little bit. So again, now I'm going to go ahead and put this back over here. Now, so you'll see this is on a separate layer here. It says curves. Here's, if you click on that, it will pull up the properties. Now, here's the deal. If I zoom out, I don't want my whole image this dark. What I want to do is just have shadows on the strawberries. So here's what we're going to do. You'll notice everything darkened all over here. If I look next to my curves layer here, you can see it also added a layer mask in here. And in masking, everything that's white is showing the effect. If I were to paint black in here, let me grab a brush here and let me get a decent sized brush. If I were to come in here and paint black, let me come up here and you can see it's creating a mask over here. And if I click on this, you can really see it. So this works just like any other mask layer. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me back this up a couple steps here. So you see in here, it's all white. I'm going to click on this, come up here under Image, Adjustments. I'm going to invert this. So that mask layer is not going to be white. Now you can see over here, it turned it completely black, which means I've masked out that whole effect. And the reason I did that, now what I can do is I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to get a smaller size of it here. Let's see, why did I lose my brush size here? There we go. All right. So look over here, you can see it's all black. That means if I paint with white, so I'm going to switch this over here to white. Now I can paint in some shadows in here. So if the light is coming from up above to the left here, there'll be a little bit of a shadow under your label here. All right. There'll probably be a little shadow on this strawberry here. And I'm going around because the strawberries, it's not a flat surface. The light is going to be coming from up here, and we have the highlight over here, which means you're going to have a little bit of shadow under your label over here. And I'm going to do shadow here. Now again, the shadow is going to follow that curve of the strawberry down. Same thing here, add a little bit of shadow. I'm following the curve of the strawberry. And I'll go with a slightly smaller brush here. There'll even be a little bit of a shadow here. So it's not a lot, but be a little bit of shadow here. Now what you can do here too is if that effect seems to be too much, you can come up here and use your opacity and back it off a little bit if you want to. You can also double click on this on the adjustment layer here for the curves. You could even make it a little darker if you wanted to here. But I don't think we want to do that. So again, a lot of this is just training your eye to look at things and see what looks right. So this looks pretty believable right now. Maybe my shadows are a little too dark, so instead of 100% opacity, I'll drop this down to about 80. And then once you get this to a point where you think it looks believable, you're going to want to save it. And you want to save it two ways. I'm going to go ahead and save this as, and again, your last name. And this is still part of assignment 2. Save a layered file for your own files here. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop here where I throw everything. That way, again, if you were doing this for a client and they said it didn't look believable or the shadows didn't look quite right, if you have your layered file, you can always go back and just click on these and adjust them without having to start over from scratch. Then what you're going to do to complete this assignment is you're going to create a TIFF that you're going to send in for this assignment. So once you've saved your layered file, come over here in the Layers panel. In the far right corner, go for that hamburger menu, click on it, and we're going to flatten it, first of all. Then what we're going to do, whenever you're working digitally, we're working in RGB files, but you have to get in the habit, if you're doing anything for print, you should convert these. So we have the layered file, which is RGB, but for what you're going to send in to me, I want you to convert this to CMYK. And the way you do that is come up here under Image, come to Mode, the first stop on the drop down. And here you can see it's in RGB. We're going to switch it to CMYK. You'll get that dialog box, hit OK. And now we're going to go ahead and save this again. But now what we're going to do is change the file format to that TIFF format. Anything that's going for print, you're going to want to do in the TIFF format. If this was going on a website or a digital platform, you would probably save it as a JPEG. But I want you to save TIFFs because they're higher quality, and for your portfolio, you're going to want the highest quality image you can have. And once you do that, you're going to get this dialog box. Always make sure for image compression you want none on here, because every time you compress the image, you're losing a little bit of the information in there. That's one of the things that happens with JPEGs. And then come over here. If you're on a PC, go ahead and switch the operating system here. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. And then go ahead and hit OK. And when you do this, this file is probably going to be too large to send through email. You can always check down here. It's actually only 11.5 email if you looked at, or 11.5 megabytes. So this would actually go through the Gmail account if you want to send it in that way. If your file is any bigger than 24 megabytes, you'll want to use WeTransfer.com to send your files in.